On the night of the 1st of January 1902, a 13-year-old girl was murdered in her bed at a remote farmhouse in rural South Australia. Her parents were 20 kilometers away, and her two brothers were asleep in a shed behind the house. According to her older sister, a stranger had entered the home during the night, attacked them both, and disappeared before anyone could be caught or identified. Yet, almost from the beginning, there were reasons to doubt that account. What followed was a case that would divide public opinion, fill newspaper headlines, and leave behind more questions than answers. And more than a century later, the question remains exactly where it began. Who killed Bertha Schippan? The Schippans were Wendish, a Slavic people from the region of Lusatia in what is now eastern Germany and western Poland, though they made the voyage to Australia on a German ship. The Wends maintained their own distinct language, customs, and traditions, and a significant number of them emigrated to South Australia during the 1850s, settling in the Barossa Valley and the surrounding districts, where they formed close communities organized around the Lutheran Church. After the voyage, they settled in the Barossa Valley region, eventually making their home in the locality of Towitta, a small farming settlement roughly 70 miles northeast of Adelaide, situated about 6 kilometers west of the town of Sedan. The community they joined was tightly knit and Lutheran, its social life centered on the church, and its working life organized around farming. Mattes established his farm there and built a life that, by the standards of the time and place, was a respectable one. On the 23rd of July 1874, he married a woman named Johanne Daunt at the Lutheran chapel in Eden Valley. Johanne had also come to Australia as a child, having spent her first years in Prussia. Over the following years, the couple had 7 children. The first was Pauline Augusta, born 1875. Then came Maria Augusta, known as Mary, born in 1877. After Mary came Carl Friedrich, referred to in family records as Fritz. Then Heinrich Johann, known variously as Henry or Harry. Then August Wilhelm, who went by Gustav. Then Wilhelm Johann Gottlieb, called Willy or Wilhelm. And finally, in 1888, the youngest, Johann Elisabeth, known as Bertha. According to the reports, Bertha Schippan was a stern and demanding man. He expected his children to work and to behave, and he ran the farm with the kind of discipline common among families of his background and generation. He was not, however, simply a hard-working farmer with a short temper. In 1896, he was arrested and charged with shooting with intent and causing grievous bodily harm after he shot Carl August Hartwig, a 20-year-old from a neighboring property, in the left leg between the knee and the ankle. The incident occurred during an altercation between Mattes and Hartwig and 3 other teenage boys. The trial began on the 11th August 1896, and the jury deliberated for only 10 minutes before returning a verdict of not guilty, apparently accepting that Mattes had been provoked. But the arrest, the trial, and the scrutiny that came with it had a lasting effect on him. After the proceedings concluded, he withdrew increasingly from the social life of the community, directing his energy almost entirely toward the farm. In December 1899, the family suffered its first major bereavement when Pauline, the eldest daughter, died from typhoid at the age of 24. Her death was a serious blow, and the household restructured around the loss. By the end of 1901, the 2 oldest boys, Fritz and Heinrich, had left Towitta to find farm work elsewhere. Mary, now 24, had stayed at home. Gustav, 18, and Wilhelm, 15, assisted their father on the farm. Bertha, the youngest at 13, was still of school age and living at home. On the 27th December 1901, Mattes and Johann left Towitta to visit relatives. Their destination was in the Eden Valley area, approximately 20 kilometers away across rough country. It was not unusual for them to leave the older children in charge for a few days. The 4 children remaining at home, Mary, Bertha, Gustav, and Wilhelm, were accustomed to managing the farm in their parents' absence. On the night of the 1st of January 1902, Gustav and Wilhelm were sleeping in the iron shed behind the house, and Mary and Bertha were alone in the main house, sharing a bed in their parents' bedroom. At around 10 or 10:30 that evening, Mary later said she was woken by the sensation of a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. She became aware of a man in the room. She struggled and was grabbed by the wrists and thrown against the wall. She struck her head and fell to the floor. She recounted hearing Bertha waking and both of them crying out. At some point she heard the intruder instruct her to move to the kitchen, and as she did so, she glimpsed something in his coat or clothing that she believed was a knife. Seizing the moment, as the man was momentarily distracted by the object hitting the floor, she ran. She reached her brothers in the shed. They did not initially believe her. Then a scream came from the house. Gustav ran to the nearest neighbor, the Henke household, which was roughly a kilometer away. The neighbor told him there was nothing to be done and that if they needed help, they should fetch the constable. Dejected, Gustav returned to the shed. The three siblings then armed themselves with pitchforks and a stick, lit a lamp, and went to the house. In the kitchen, they found blood on the floor and the bedroom door was closed. They called for Bertha and received no answer. Frightened, they did not open the door. Instead, they walked more than a kilometer to the home of District Constable Alfred Charles Lambert and asked him to come at once. Lambert returned with them to the farm. He lit a lamp and led the way inside, following the blood trail through the house. In the bedroom, he found Bertha's body on the floor, face down, her arms pulled around her head and her legs stretched out behind her. Her throat had been slashed. She was dead. Lambert took the three children back to his family's home for the night and locked the Schippan house. In the morning, he passed the news to Mounted Constable Mowbray at the Truro station, who sent a telegram to the police commissioner in Adelaide. The Schippan parents were informed and they made their way back to Towitta. On getting there, Mathis formally identified Bertha's body. Then, on the 3rd of January, Bertha was buried at the Sedan Cemetery. The local coroner, Mr. J. Mulligan, arrived at the Schippan farm on the 9th of January 1902 to conduct an inquest. It ran for 2 days and was presided over by a jury of 6 local men. The event drew large crowds from across the district, who gathered around the outbuildings on the property where proceedings were held. The Adelaide newspapers, fiercely competitive with each other, scrambled to get the story out first. The advertiser went as far as purchasing a motor car to race copy to the telegraph station at Angaston, which was 26 kilometers away. It was reportedly the first time a car had been used for news reporting in Australia. The physical evidence presented at the inquest was detailed and, in some respects, ambiguous. Dr. Ramsay Smith, the city coroner and head of the Department of Health, served as the examining physician. He testified that Bertha had been stabbed and slashed approximately 40 times around the throat, neck, and face. He found wounds to her chin, cheeks, the back of her neck, and her lower body. The fatal injury was a severing of the carotid artery, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. 2 of Bertha Schippan's knives had been found in the house, one of them heavily blood-stained. A tin bowl containing water with traces of blood was also recovered, along with a blood-soaked towel. Smith also found hair that appeared to have been pulled out by the roots at the scene. When Mary was examined following the murder, she had bruising on her right shoulder, scrapes on her elbows, scratches across the upper portion of her right arm, and bruising on her knuckles and legs. These injuries were consistent with the struggle she had described, but several other details attracted more pointed scrutiny. The skirt Mary said she had grabbed as she fled the house had bloodstains on it. The family explained that the blood came from a sheep slaughtered on the property a few days earlier. However, Smith could not determine whether the blood on Mary's clothing was human or animal. That question was never definitively resolved. There were also questions about Mary's hair. The doctor who examined her noted that her hair had been very recently washed. Constable Lambert's mother confirmed that Mary had not washed her hair while staying at the Lambert house after the murder. If she had not washed it there, then where and when had she washed it, and why. The question of a stranger intruder was considered but found difficult to support by the physical evidence. Constable Lambert testified that he found no signs of forced entry. The police, assisted by a tracker described as one of the most skilled in the region, found no evidence of any stranger having been near the Schippan property. The tracker did identify what he determined to be Bertha Schippan's footprints near the house, and he estimated them to be no more than 2 days old. But the police did not pursue this finding, noting that Mattes was confirmed to have been at his relative's home in the Eden Valley area on the night in question. Sensational evidence emerged mid-inquest when Mary disclosed that she had been in a secret relationship with a young man from Towitta named Gustav Nitschke, a 21-year-old laborer. The relationship had been ongoing for approximately 12 months. Spectators were removed from the hearing before the full details were presented. When Nitschke was called to give evidence, he confirmed the relationship and acknowledged that what he referred to as improper conduct had passed between them, including sexual intercourse on 3 occasions. He further admitted that he had visited the Schippan farm on the 27th of December 1901, shortly after the parents had left, and that Bertha had been present during part of that visit. It emerged that Bertha had known about the relationship between Mary and Nitschke. However, Mary denied threatening Bertha in connection with it. Nitschke denied any involvement in the murder and stated that on the night of the 1st of January he had been in Adelaide, employed to drive a wagon from Sedan to the city, and this was confirmed by his employer. On the evening of the 11th of January, after a little over an hour of deliberation, the inquest jury returned its verdict. The coroner, Mr. Mulligan, was reported to have tears in his eyes as he read it out. The jury believed that Bertha Schippan had met her death by having her throat cut by her sister, Mary Augusta Schippan. This led to Mary being taken into custody. Sobbing, she was held briefly at Angaston before being transferred to Adelaide jail to await trial. Mary's trial opened on the 4th of March 1902 in the Supreme Court in Adelaide before Chief Justice Sir Samuel Way, and it lasted 6 days. Mary was represented by Sir Josiah Simon, King's Counsel, a senator in the first Australian Parliament, and one of the most accomplished barristers in South Australia. His fee of 50 guineas was paid by a local farmer who knew the Schippan family and believed in Mary's innocence. The public interest in the trial was considerable. Large crowds gathered at the Supreme Court each day, jostling for access to the public gallery. As Mary was escorted between the jail and the court, people lined the streets to watch. Inside the court, she maintained a composed and largely impassive demeanor throughout the proceedings. Simon's strategy at trial was to direct suspicion firmly toward Gustav Nitschke. He portrayed Nitschke as a man who had treated Mary with contempt, conducting an intimate relationship with her while simultaneously pursuing a wealthier woman, and who had driven a wedge between the 2 sisters by his conduct. Simon presented Nitschke as someone with both motive and character deficiencies sufficient to cast serious doubt on any other candidate. The problem with this argument was Nitschke's alibi. His employer, Mr. Schanfeld, confirmed that Nitschke had been engaged to drive a wagon from Sedan to Adelaide on the 31st of December 1901, and that he had seen Nitschke at his Carrington Street premises in Adelaide at various points the next day, including at 9 o'clock and again at 11 o'clock that night. Other witnesses corroborated his presence in Adelaide on the 2nd and 3rd of January as well. This placed Nitschke approximately 120 kilometers from Towitta on the night of the murder, over rough roads that in 1902 would have taken many hours to travel. Simon nonetheless pursued the theory with energy. He highlighted Nitschke's admission of sexual intimacy with Mary, his flirtatious behavior toward Bertha during the December visit, and his concurrent courtship of the wealthier young woman, suggesting that Nitschke had both personal motive and moral character consistent with someone capable of violence. He succeeded in generating enough suspicion that public sympathy shifted decisively toward Mary and against Nitschke. Nitschke was subjected to hostile treatment by the crowds attending the trial. He required a police escort between his lodgings and the court after being attacked. The prosecution's case rested on the circumstantial evidence gathered at the inquest. The blood on Mary's clothing, the missing blue blouse, and the fragment found beneath Bertha's body, the freshly washed hair, the absence of any evidence of a stranger at the property, and the nature of Mary's injuries, which were consistent with either a struggle with an intruder or, potentially, with injuries sustained during the attack on Bertha. None of the physical evidence was conclusive. There's no evidence to suggest Mary was in the bedroom at the time of the murder. It could easily have been explained by other means. After 6 days of testimony and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty. The announcement was met with cheering both inside and outside the court building. A crowd of around 3,000 people had gathered outside and greeted Mary with applause as she emerged, accompanied by her parents. Gustav Nitschke was quietly escorted out through a rear entrance. By the time proceedings concluded, the pressure on him was so severe that he left South Australia altogether. After leaving South Australia, he adopted a new name and is believed to have died in New Zealand in the mid-20th century. No further charges were ever brought against him regarding Bertha's death. Mary returned to Towitta following her acquittal. She did not resume the life she had lived before the murder. She became reclusive, rarely leaving the farm, avoiding the community gatherings and social structures of the district. She never got married. In the years after the trial, she became known in the surrounding area as the Grey Lady, a figure seen occasionally but kept largely at a distance from ordinary life. She moved at some point to a small town away from Towitta, where this reputation followed her. In 1919, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis. She spent time in a sanatorium before returning to the care of her family. She eventually died on the 4th of July 1919 at the home of her older brother near Morgan at the age of 41. Her mother was present at her death. After the trial, the Schippan parents stayed in Towitta for several years. However, by 1908, they decided to move to the small village of Lightpass. Mattis died in 1911 and Johan in 1923. The Schippan farm at Towitta is gone. The log house with a thatched roof, the iron shed where Gustav and Wilhelm slept, and the outbuildings Mattis had been constructing that year, none of it remains. The site is now farmland. More than a century after the murder, the case remains officially unsolved, and the 3 principal suspects remain the same 3 the community identified in 1902. Mary Schippan, Gustav Nitschke, and Mattis Schippan. Now, let's examine each suspect and the arguments against them. The case against Mary rests almost entirely on circumstantial evidence, but there is a fair amount of it, and it clusters in a particular direction. The blood on her clothing was never definitively typed. The fragment of her blue blouse was found beneath Bertha's body, and the rest of it was never recovered. Her hair had been freshly washed at a time and place no one could account for. No physical evidence placed a stranger at the property. Mary's injuries, which the prosecution argued were inconsistent with the kind of violent assault she described, and more consistent with minor injuries sustained during the attack on Bertha, rounded out a picture that was damning without being conclusive. There is also the question of motive, though this is speculative. Mary was 24 years old, unmarried, and conducting a secret relationship with a man who was simultaneously pursuing someone else and who showed no intention of making a legitimate commitment to her. Bertha, 13 years old and living in the same house, knew about the relationship. In a community where reputation mattered profoundly, where the Lutheran Church formed the social backbone of daily life, and where an unmarried woman's standing depended on her moral character, the exposure of that relationship by a younger sibling would have had serious consequences. Whether those consequences were sufficient motive for murder is a question no one can answer with certainty. Mary denied at inquest that she had ever threatened Bertha about it. The case against Gustav Nitschke is weaker than the public response to the trial suggested. His alibi was solid, corroborated by multiple witnesses, and the distance between Adelaide and Towitta made his physical presence at the farm that night effectively impossible. Simon's courtroom performance was skillful, and the public was prepared to receive Nitschke as a villain based on his admitted conduct toward Mary. but the actual evidence against him as the murderer was thin. The case against Bertha Schippan is different in character. It does not rest on physical evidence at all, since no such evidence implicates him, but on rumor, inference, and a deathbed confession story that has never been verified. The theory, which circulated after the trial, holds that Mattes had killed a hawker, a traveling salesman who visited the farm, and became, in the phrasing of the time, overly familiar with Johann Schippan, and that Bertha had discovered or become aware of this and threatened to expose it. Under this theory, Mattes rode from Eden Valley to Towitta that night, killed Bertha to silence her, and rode back before morning. Rumors that he confessed to exactly this on his deathbed have circulated ever since. No documented record of such a confession exists, and no one who claims to have heard it has produced a verifiable account. The obstacles to this theory are significant. The journey from Eden Valley to Towitta and back across rough terrain at night, in the dark, by horseback, was approximately 40 kilometers round trip. People familiar with the roads and the country have argued over the years about whether it was possible at all in a single night, and the consensus among those who know the area well has generally been that it was unlikely, though not definitively impossible. There is the additional detail, noted in some accounts, that one of the Schippan horses was found to be wet with perspiration on the next morning, while the other was dry. This was reported as suggestive, but no formal investigation appears to have been conducted around it, and the Schippan horses were presumably not secured in a way that would prevent them being used and returned without the children knowing. The tracker's footprint finding at the inquest was noted but set aside because Mattes's presence in Eden Valley that night had been confirmed. What the police did not formally pursue was the question of whether those prints had been made on that particular night. One unresolved detail has emerged from accounts of the case. Some family sources claim Mary confessed to someone shortly after the murder that the man she struggled with in the bedroom was her father, Mattes. She was reportedly advised or decided against repeating this in court, fearing disbelief. If true, this alters the entire narrative. It suggests Mary's initial account of a stranger was not her genuine recollection, but a substitute due to the perceived danger or unbelievability of her original story. Furthermore, it implies the two prevailing theories, Mary as the killer and Mattes as the killer, are not separate, but rather two interpretations of the same events, differing only in whether the bedroom incident was a murder or an attempt to prevent one. That's speculative, and the source isn't strong enough to consider it established fact. However, it's a detail that once you encounter it, is hard to ignore. For most of the century, the community around Towitta has held its own view. Generations of families familiar with the Schippans or their neighbors have generally agreed that Mary was the most likely culprit. This consensus stems from the absence of evidence of a stranger, unexplained physical details, and Mary's behavior in the years following the trial. These factors reinforce the community's judgment even though the law ultimately found otherwise. Ultimately, whether this community verdict holds more authority than the formal one is a personal decision. The Schippan case did not quietly fade away after the not guilty verdict, unlike many other criminal cases from that era. It remained a fixture in South Australian public memory, eventually making its way into print and then onto the screen. The books came first. In 2004, Peter Donovan published a detailed account of the trial. Patricia Summerling then followed in 2011 with a work of adult fiction centered around the case titled The Noon Lady of Towitta. In 2017, a local man named Richard Dutschke, co-authored with Ron Nitschke, a descendant of Gustav Nitschke, published what is probably the most comprehensive account yet. The fact that a Nitschke family member co-wrote the book over a century later highlights the profound impact of the events of January 1902 on the families involved and their communities. The ABC reached this milestone first. In September 1984, they aired a telemovie titled The Schippan Mystery, directed by Dee Drew and written by Kenneth G. Ross. It was an 86-minute color film. This marked the conclusion of a 4-part telemovie series called Verdict, each dramatizing a real Australian case. The cast included Sally Mackenzie as Mary, Joseph First as Matthees, and Dorothy Allison as Johanne. It didn't solve the mystery of who committed the murder, but did take a stance. It framed the story around the idea that Mary might have killed Bertha to escape what it described as a harsh and Spartan family life. This interpretation suggested Mary as the perpetrator, but didn't outright declare it. The case doesn't leave a tidy mystery like a locked room with a single solution. Instead, it presents a set of irreconcilable positions. Each position is supported by enough evidence to be plausible, yet also contains enough gaps to be questioned. A 13-year-old girl was killed with her father's knife in the house she grew up in. No one has ever been held accountable for what happened in that house that night. Everything else is inference. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts on the case or any extra information I missed, please let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video.